Thank you for attending our informational webinar. My name is Lane Smith. I'm the research coordinator for New York Sea Grant. And with us is Jean-Ann Johnston, who's the fiscal officer for New York Sea Grant, and Becky Schufert, who's the director. And we're located at Stony Brook University. Becky, do you want to say anything introductory?
Sure. Sorry, a little technical difficulty there. Yeah, just really quickly, because I want people to be able to have time to hear about the RFP and ask questions, but just want to thank all of you for your time and interest in the RFP and for participating today. And you know, please do ask questions along the way. And if you need to, you can follow up with Jean-Ann and Lane following as well. And so without further ado, Lane, I'll turn it over to you because there's lots to cover and I'm sure lots of questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Becky. So during the course of this webinar, we'll review the call. If you have questions, you can type them in the chat, or you can use the raise your hand feature. And Jean-Ann or Becky, if you happen to notice questions in the chat or hands raised that I don't notice this call, just let me know.
Will do.
Thanks. To get started, for the new people, I'll just do a quick information about Sea Grant. New York Sea Grant is a cooperative program between Cornell University and the State University of New York, SUNY. It's part of the National Sea Grant College Program, which is a national network of 34 Sea Grant programs associated with Great Lakes and marine coastal states. And our main offices are at Stony Brook University, and we also have extension staff that are spread at different locations across the state, with the main extension office at Cornell University. Sea Grant research is applied research that funds research for different priorities related to coastal issues. And each Sea Grant program has slightly different topics or issues related to their unique environment. But overall, the research is applied, and then it's extended through the extension program for each Sea Grant. And often Sea Grant programs have collaborative research calls, regional research calls as well. But each Sea Grant program also has this biennial research call, which is the main funding source for research from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Sea Grant Office. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and start to go through the highlights of this call. Raise your hand or type into the chat if you have any questions. Okay, so first off, your research will be, your pre-proposal will be submitted through our research website, our website submission portal, which is at nysgrant.org/proposals, which brings you to this site that lists the current funding opportunities. And you'll see that the National New York Sea Grant's Biennial Research Call is listed at the top, and you click on that, which brings you to this page here, which gives you some background and details about submission. Also, there's the link to the RFP, which we'll be going through, and a link to our current new strategic plan. When you're ready to submit, you would come from here to here and click on this Apply Now button, which brings you to this form that you would fill out with your contact information, um, the title of your project. You don't have to put the whole title here, just like the first few words. Funding is for 2 years. Occasionally, there's research calls that might have 3 years, but we're only funding 2 years. You would click this browse button, and this brings up your typical file dialog. You'd find your PDF, click add, and then down here you would submit proposal. It'll get uploaded. You'll get a confirmation email. And if you want to submit an additional pre-proposal, my recommendation is after you go through this process, you close out and close all your tabs, come back and begin again. Other people who have tried to do more than one have had issues with that. So I recommend that you just close out and start again if you want to submit a second pre-proposal. So moving on to the actual research call. This is the document. We'll just go through the highlights. The main thing you should know is that the pre-proposal deadline is 4:30 p.m. On Tuesday, January 17th. The web portal closes at 4:30, and you will not be able to submit after that, even if you're on the page. So it's recommended that you do this form with an adequate buffer, just in case there's connection issues. It's good to have a buffer. If you're having problems, you can call me or email me. I can't guarantee I can help, but generally, you shouldn't have any problems. Sometimes if you have a real long title in this form, it might give you an error. So don't do your whole title, especially if it's a long one. And as far as the deadline, it's based on this time here and not on the time on your computer. You might be a minute or two off, from computer to computer. So you might think you have 2 minutes left, and maybe you don't. So pay attention to this time when you're submitting your pre-proposal. Your pre-proposal is supposed to be a single PDF. Double check that it's your final version and make sure it opens okay and there aren't any issues with it before you submit it. The funding cycles for 2 years, and the maximum funds is $120,000 per year for 2 years. So that would be a maximum of $240,000 per project for a 2-year project. And depending on how the budgets work out, we're going to support about 6 to 7 projects. So we're going to probably invite or encourage double that. So say around 14 or 15 proposals out of all the pre-proposals will be encouraged to submit full proposals. As I mentioned, Sea Grant is a cooperative program. It funds research, applied research to help New York State coastal stakeholders to make decisions for the benefit of coastal environments and communities. And each of our research RFPs have different topics that are based on our strategic plan. And as I showed here, this is our current strategic plan, which brings up our new strategic plan for 24-27. This omnibus is first of our, there's two years research cycles per strategic plan. So this research cycle is our first 2 year, which covers 24-25. And you can read through the strategic plan and find out information about that. But basically, the process of coming up with topics is based on input from our stakeholders, which guides our strategic plan, which we went through that process and have finalized it for the next 4 years. And we develop a suite of topics that fall under focus areas that we develop new topics for each biennial call. The first of these focus areas are healthy coastal ecosystems, and we have several goals under that. The first goal is related to habitats, ecosystems, and the services they provide are protected, enhanced, and restored. And we have several research ideas to address that goal under this focus area, and you can read through them in the call. The second goal is related to communities and agencies applying tools to manage ecosystems, and you can read more about it in the call. And then second focus area is on sustainable fisheries and aquaculture. And our first goal is related to domestic fisheries, aquaculture, and other coastal freshwater and natural resources, supply food jobs, economic and cultural benefits. And there's 7 research topic areas under that. Another goal addresses natural resources and sustainable management to support economically viable fishing communities, industries that include commercial, recreational, subsistence fisheries, and aquaculture. And we have 4 areas under there for research. Our next focus areas resilient communities and economies. And our first goal under that is related to recreation, tourism, water-dependent businesses, industries, and the resiliency to changing environmental conditions, extreme events, coastal hazards, and disruptions. And there's 4 research areas under that. And then the second goal is coastal communities have the capacity and resources to adapt to extreme weather conditions and coastal hazards. And there's 7 research areas under that. And then the third goal is water resources and are protected, enhanced to meet existing and emerging needs of communities and economies. And we have 3 research projects areas under that. And then the fourth goal is environmental literacy and workforce development. That's the 4th focus area. And then we have a goal related to environmentally literate public participates in formal, non-formal learning opportunities. There's 4 research areas under that. And then the second goal is a resilient and diverse skilled workforce is engaged and able to address regional and national needs through traditional and innovative careers. And we have 2 research areas under that. And you can read the specifics in the call. And if you have questions, you can email me or call me. So we'll just go through the highlights of the submission of your pre-proposal. The main, we'll start with eligibility. The main audience for this call are researchers at universities and colleges in New York State. The lead PI for research projects through this call must have their research base in New York State. So that's the top preference. Next would be researchers at other non-for-profit research institutions. These could be academic institutions, but not colleges, but not-for-profit organizations. And then researchers who are personnel, state or local agencies or nonprofit organizations, and then researchers at for-profit institutions and companies. For people who submit through this call, though the lead research PI has to be based in New York State, co-PIs, associate PIs, and collaborators can be from out of state. They just can't be the lead PI. So also graduate students, whether they're PhD students or not, or other students cannot be included as PIs on the project. For our purposes, postdocs can be a PI, a co-PI, or even a lead PI, but that varies depending on institutions, and not every institution allows postdocs to be PIs on a proposal. I know that Cornell doesn't allow it and Stony Brook doesn't allow it, but there might be others that do. So you would have to check with your institution about that.
Stony Brook will allow it if you get a waiver from your dean.
Okay, good to know. And I don't know how that works in most other institutions in New York State, so ask. The projects funded under this call are 2 years, beginning February 1st, 2024, and lasting until 1/31/26. Though you can submit proposals for 1 year. Those are welcome. The way it works is funding is distributed 1 year at a time. So you will get funding for the first year, and then you'll get funding for the second year if it's a 2-year project, if you are demonstrating progress, which would be demonstrated through a progress report that is requested near the end of the first year of the project. Also, everything depends on funding allocations. And sometimes, we're subjected to continuing resolutions, and the funding for the sea grant programs is often delayed or often given in pieces over a course of, say, a few months. So you may only get, when your projects start, you may not get the entirety of all your award. You might get it in a couple pieces. So it's just something to keep in mind. Awards are administered as a cost reimbursable award. Successful applicants submit invoices for reimbursement. Also, when you create your pre-proposal, it's expected that your budget estimate is realistic, and we're not expecting a big change between the pre-proposal and the full proposal. So keep that in mind. This funding requires a cost share requirement of 50%. And so, for example, if you are requesting 100,000, you must show 50,000 of non-federal cost share, and you need to maintain that for each year of the project. And if you have questions about what constitutes cost share, you can ask Jean Ann about that. Corey, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just wondering if there's a cap or a limit on the total percentage for indirect costs, or if you go by whatever the institution prefers.
We go by whatever your institution is. When you apply, your OSP office will have to provide us with documentation on what your published rate is, but there's no cap on it. It is what it is.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Your proposal would have a limit on salary requests. Typically, if you're a full-time professor, it's 2 months total from the budget. But some principal and associate investigators can be up to 6 months. And Jean Ann can explain the details of that. You can collaborate with other sea grant programs, which are on the same funding cycle. So if you have research that crosses into other state, marine, or Great Lakes waters, you can collaborate with other sea grant programs. You cannot, and this is related to regional and duplicate submissions, you cannot submit the same proposal to 2 different sea grants. If you're working with another Sea Grant program. Each, you could have, you could be addressing a wider region, but they're two different projects and they each have to submit separate proposals. You could be a co-PI on their proposal and they could be a co-PI in yours. You have to follow their submission guidelines and they have to submit ours. And as well, you can have a submission through NSF or another Sea Grant program that's complementary, but they can't be duplicate. And as mentioned before, co-PIs, associate PIs, and collaborators can be from out of state.
Lane, there's a question in the chat. From Ruth. Can any funding be subawarded to a Canadian nonprofit as partners for work on the Erie and Ontario, on Lake Erie and Ontario?
I believe so. Jeanne, do you have an answer for that?
I will look into that and get back to you before the end of the webinar.
I know that we've had collaborators from Canada, like, the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources. I don't know if they were on the budget. I can't remember that, but Jeanne will get back to you on that. So part of your submission is a series of acknowledgements that you need to kind of check off that are requirements for the full proposal in case you're encouraged to submit a full proposal. That includes a data management plan, which I'll let you read about, an extension and outreach plan. A core responsibility for Sea Grant research is also extension, and research funded under this call needs to be extended, and you can read the details about that, and there's an acknowledgement to do for that. And then we also have a NEPA form that has to be filled out for full proposals, and you'll have an acknowledgement in that. One of the mechanisms that this call has is a Sea Grant Scholar Fellowship that we encourage PI authors to add to their project. It is a fellowship that provides for a student to work on the project without being considered an employee, which saves some indirect costs, which kind of helps project funds to go a little bit further. There's details about the policies of the fellowship are available from Jeanne if you want to ask her. We provide details in the full proposal instructions. There's a scholar fellowship policies, and but if you want to get that early, we can send that to you. When the project award is made, and if you included a Sea Grant Scholar in your budget, you do not receive those funds. Sea Grant withholds those funds, and we pay the scholar the stipend during the time of the project.
And Lane,
Yeah.
Lane, could I just, oh, go ahead and finish. I was just going to clarify something, but I'll do so after.
Let me just, scholars are
Yep.
appointed by the lead PI of the project. They decide who they want to be on the project as a scholar, and the rates are determined by their graduate student rate. And it is a fellowship. They're not employees. They're considered a fellow. If you have Sea Grant Scholars, you can also include in the budget graduate research assistant, which would be considered as an employee. Becky, you had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, and there is a question from Corey in the chat too. I wanted to clarify that it's not a separate fellowship application. The scholar is part of the research that you're proposing. So I just wanted to clarify that piece.
Yes.
And to Lane's last point, you can have Sea Grant Scholars, but you can also have graduate students as employees, but you do have IDC on those.
Yeah.
And so let's see, it was Corey had a question. Do the fellowship funds include tuition and fringe?
I'll let Jeannie answer that.
Tuition is not allowed on Sea Grant funds, so you would have to request a tuition waiver. We don't calculate fringe the way your university would. We add about $3,400 to their fellowship funds to cover the Stony Brook health insurance for fellows.
Since they're fellows, they're not treated as employees, so they don't have that IDC, right?
Right, they don't have IDC or fringe, but we do provide them with health insurance.
Yeah, so this is part of this call and it's not a separate thing. So we encourage PIs to include Sea Grant scholars as part of their project. And that scholar fellowship is their work on this project. Typically, many of these projects fund typically a master's student because, you know, it's a 2-year cycle and usually graduate students are 2 years. So was there, there's other questions. Oh yes, about tuition, I don't think Cornell, I learned that Cornell doesn't allow this, but some places you can ask for a tuition waiver and that tuition waiver can be applied to match. Is that correct, Jean-Ann?
Yes, if your university will give you a tuition waiver, you can use the full amount as match on the research project.
Hi there, can I clarify one other thing about if you check the box for the stipend? Are you saying that you can't charge tuition at all on the Sea Grant, or you're saying that if they got the fellowship, it does not include tuition? And
You can't charge
still
tuition at all.
at all? Sea
No,
Grant funds
it's an
cannot do anything.
unallowable expense
Okay,
on Sea Grant
all right.
funds.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? All right, let's get to the submission. So, like I said, it's a single PDF that must be submitted by 4:30 Tuesday, January 17th through our submission portal through here. When you write your proposal document, your pre-proposal document, use 1-inch margins, Times New Roman 12 point. Section 6A through C is a 2-page maximum. Do not include a full budget, appendices, letters of support. That's not part of the pre-proposal. You make sure you have a readable file. Make sure, like, a good idea is to open it on another machine. Make sure it opens normally. We recommend using Firefox, Edge, or Chrome. You might want to make sure it's up to date and someplace where you have adequate, stable internet connection, preferably your main university office. It's recommended that you don't wait till the last couple of minutes in case there's some kind of internet congestion or whatever. You have a buffer to deal with any unexpected connectivity issues. You can call us if you have issues. We can't guarantee that we'll solve anything. Becky?
Sorry, there's another question about fellowships just before you go too much further, just popped in from Megan. Are they available for other than marine sciences and fisheries goal area?
Yeah, they're available to everyone who submits a.
Yeah. They're
Yeah,
available. Go ahead, Jean-Ann, you take it.
Oh, as long as your research proposal is accepted for a full proposal and you're doing the budget for that. If you have a student who's in ecology and evolution or engineering and they're going to be working on your project, that's fine. They'll still be a Sea Grant fellow.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that the research that we would support to address those topics can be, the natural sciences, the social sciences, engineering, economics, environmental economics, sociology. So it's not strictly traditional marine science research. It's all these areas. So when you look at the topics, you'll see that there's opportunities for a variety of research disciplines that can be used to address those topics.
Okay, so the only thing we need to do in that case is really just check like the 5D box that says Sea Grant Scholar
Yes.
requested. Okay,
Yes,
thanks.
for your
Because there's a link to like another Sea Grant fellowship for the marine sciences. So this is just, it's just a box checking in this
Yeah.
Yes.
And again, to clarify, it is not a separate fellowship application. What you're seeing, I think, if you're talking about what you're seeing on the proposal page, that's the John A. Knaus Marine Policy Fellowship, which is entirely separate. And that is not just marine, it's Great Lakes as well, just to be clear, but to change the word marine takes an act of Congress. So to that point, since I have your ear on it, if you have graduate students that were interested in a policy fellowship, have them check that out as well. Just a little plug for the fellowship since you brought it up.
Yeah, we have 3 active fellowship opportunities. And if you have graduate students who are interested, they might be want to take a look at this. We have a NIMS Sea Grant Fellowship, which is fisheries related. And then there's a Coastal Management Digital Coast Fellowship Program through the Office of Coastal Management at NOAA. And then, as Becky mentioned, the Knaus Marine Policy Fellowship, which includes Great Lakes. These are separate fellowships. They're announced every year. They're not part of this call. They're their own thing. And this Sea Grant Scholar Fellowship is just part of this call, but it's linked.
Yeah,
to
the scholars are tied directly to the research that you're proposing.
Exactly. All right. So make sure you have enough time to submit. You need to make sure your proposal has all the different components. And anything that's missing will not be reviewed. There is a pre-proposal review panel that meets to review the pre-proposals. It consists of our Sea Grant senior program managers, our program advisory council, and one of our senior managers is the head of extension. The pre-proposals are distributed to Sea Grant program managers, our extension specialists, and our program advisory council, and they review it. They have a review sheet, and then we have a panel, and we discuss all the pre-proposals and go over the comments, and they're ranked based on these criteria. There's a total score of 12 points. The main thing is how well does the proposal respond to the topics, how likelihood that the approach would be successful, and the expected products and outcomes and anticipated usefulness. There is the possibility of encouraging proposals that are out of rank based on other programmatic considerations such as geographic, institutional, and topic balance. The highest rated pre-proposals will be encouraged to submit a full proposal. We're probably fund around 7 or 8 full proposals, full projects. So we'll probably, anywhere between 14 and 16 pre-proposals will be encouraged to submit a full proposal. Any PI who submits a pre-proposal for this call is permitted to submit a full proposal, though non-encouraged proposal submissions usually have a low chance of success. Okay. And then there's some information on the full proposal process, which you can read in the call, but the full proposals have a technical review panel of peers, and there's mail peer review, which goes out to 3 peer reviews per proposal, and you can read about that in the call. So the timeline is we released the call on December 5th. Today is the webinar. The deadline for pre-proposals is January 17th. The pre-proposal panel meets February 23rd. That date might be adjusted depending on the panel schedules. By the 28th, on or before, the pre-proposal authors will be notified on whether they're encouraged or not. And then in March, there's a full proposal webinar like this one, and May 8th is the deadline for full proposals. And then on June 21, mass peer reviews are sent to PIs for response, and the deadline for that is July 5th. Tech panel meets July 17th. And funding decisions are notified July 20th. And then by the end of the year, all the paperwork for getting projects started are due, and projects start in February. So
Lane, before you go on to the next question in the chat, back to the fellowship, sorry. Cody wants to know if postdocs are eligible for the Scholar Fellowship. I do not believe so, but I'll let Jean-Ann and Lane confirm that.
I don't think so.
No, postdocs are not eligible for the Sea Grant Fellowship because they're considered as, they've already graduated.
Yeah,
The fellowships are only for continuing students
right.
that don't have a degree yet.
Right. Then there's a list of extension staff. I encourage you to look at it to help you. So you can contact them, or you could contact us if for assistance in connecting with potential end users of the research that you're working on. So
And Lane, if I could just mention, in case anybody's interested in the aquaculture line or else Great Lakes tourism recreation type of things, those positions are currently in the process of being refilled. So if you wanted to reach out to an extension person on that, let us know and we'll direct you to our Great Lakes and or our Marine District leads who can connect with you in the time being before we have folks in those positions. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Thank you. This is the actual proposal submission. These are the components of your pre-proposal. They need to be in this order. You can copy and paste this into a Word document and just delete the instructions and put your content in there. You start out with the last names of the research team, the title, list all the investigators, the PI, the co-PI, and the associate investigator, include the name, address, telephone, and also indicate the eligibility category 1, 2, 3, or 4 as listed in section 3. As stated before, the primary institutional affiliation of the lead PI has to be located in New York State. Students, New York Sea Grant staff cannot have PI or co-PI or AI status. People at federal institutions cannot be PIs. They cannot receive funding, but they can be collaborators. A lot of people will just use a table and list the names and phone and email, and then below that have the institutional address. It's helpful if you have like co-PIs at other institutions. The next section, section 4, has several subparts. Which topic you're addressing, go back to the pages in section 2 and just say which topic, which goal, and which number under that goal you're addressing. So it'd be goal A, for example, goal A1, number 2, and then copy the text that's up there. You can address more than one goal in your proposal. And then these are the series of acknowledgements that you have to have in your pre-proposal. So it would be 4B. You would just say yes or no. For that, for data management plan, you're acknowledging that you have to have a data management plan in your full proposal if you're encouraged. You have to acknowledge that you have to develop an extension outreach plan if you're encouraged. And you have to do the NEPA form. And details about all of that are in the full proposal instructions that'll be sent out. Then your budget estimate for year 1, year 2, and the total, and your estimated cost share, matching, and what are the expected sources. And as mentioned before, these are expected to be realistic. And if you submit a full proposal, that they should be basically the same. And then are you going to request a Sea Grant Scholar? Just check that off. That gives us a heads up. And if you're encouraged for a full proposal, you'll get details about that. And you'll see that on the 90-4 budget form. This is the meat of your pre-proposal. After you do for section 4 and 5, start on a new page. And section 6, the description of the project, section A through C is only 2 pages. So do not go over 2 pages. And the 3 sections are the statement of the issue and the objectives, explain how you propose to address the topics you chose, the overall objectives, how you plan to meet those objectives, your sampling, your data analysis. If the proposal is so if it's a hypothesis-based research, include your hypothesis. If you're developing a model or updating a model or some kind of decision-making tool, clearly explain the intent of it, what need it's addressing, and who are the intended end users, and include some information on validation and testing of the model or tool. And then the approach is describe the approach in accomplishing the objective. So A is your topic and your objectives, and then your approach is how you're going to achieve that. So what you're sampling and analysis and whatnot. And then explain your products, the scientific information or tools or models that are expected, and who will use them, who's going to use this information, and how you will engage them. Just give some indication on how you're going to connect with the end users, and then what type of benefits they're going to derive from that in terms of improved management or that kind of thing. And this is where you can connect with our Sea Grant extension specialists, and they can help you figure out who are the stakeholders for your idea and some ideas on how that would be engaged. That's an important part to have on your pre-proposal. Then after that, the next section is literature cited. Start on a new page and list the full citations referenced in section 6. This section does not count to your 2-page limit. If there aren't any references, just say none. Each PI, co-PI, and associate PI needs to have a curriculum vitae, 2-page maximum per person. And then the final section is on a new page, list names and affiliation of potential peer reviewers for your project. Don't include people you've worked with or collaborated with or published with within the last 4 years. You don't need to, you could only just put 1 or 2. You don't have to have 4. It's just a maximum of 4. You may also request that certain individuals not be asked to review your proposal. You don't need to contact the people. We may or may not use them, but we'll do the reach. So that is your proposal submission. These 9 sections. Then the last part is a survey. It's a question that is voluntary. It's not part of your proposal. It doesn't have any bearing on your review or evaluation. Our programs, the Sea Grant programs, are required to ask this, but you are not required to answer it. It's a demographic question that the administration is asking to submit for their data purposes. If you choose to respond, click on this link and use the form that comes up. It's a Google form, and you just click on one of these choices. It's real easy. Don't include this page in your package. Use that link to the Google form and fill that out. And it's a voluntary, and it's not part of your package, and has no bearing on your review or evaluation. And I think that covers it. So any questions on the submission or anything else?
Landon, while we're waiting for folks, I just wanted to make sure people maybe got this, but when it comes to the scholars, that is part of the maximum 120 per year. It's
Yes.
not a separate funding source. So just for those that are new to the process, I wanted to clarify that as well.
The funds for the scholars part of your 120 limit, and they're kept by Sea Grant, and Sea Grant pays the stipend from those funds to the scholar.
There is a question from Megan in the chat lane.
Should we identify any goals of which there is an overlap with our proposed?
Are you maybe Megan, you can clarify. I don't know, maybe Elaine, you're understanding it.
Well, just in the RFP, it asks for which which of the goals that our research project is responding to. And I wasn't sure if you would like us to identify many of the goals, because obviously a lot of research is interdisciplinary and it covers different areas, or you would prefer to be oh, in general, these just stick to these 1 or 2 goals. If you want it to be more focused.
Yeah.
Or...
I thought that might have been what you're asking. I think, don't just throw in the kitchen sink, so to speak, but
Right.
but if you feel that your research really does address multiple goals and research topics, because as you just pointed out, and that's one thing, we have these 4 focus areas, but the focus areas aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. They do have areas that intersect, interdisciplinary, as you mentioned. So if you feel that the research you're proposing does address more than one of the areas, that's absolutely fair and good to identify. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. And then I have one other question if there aren't any other ones. In the first paragraph, the direction is that research should be driven by stakeholder identified research needs. And I was wondering if there was a specific way that you defined stakeholder.
Lane, you want me to take that, or you want to go?
Yeah, why don't you go for it?
Okay. I think when we say that, there's a couple of ways you can look at it. Stakeholder is fairly broad in the context of coastal communities in New York State, right? But keep in mind that our strategic plan, which guides the topics that are in this, are driven by our program advisory council, our board, our program advisory networks, which are made up of our partners and stakeholders in communities across the state. But obviously, if you're working with somebody, whether it's an industry, whether it's a municipality, or anybody else for that matter, if you're working with anybody within a coastal community, that could benefit from the research that you're proposing to do, I think that's appropriate. Lane, do you want to add anything?
I just want to add, so like when in your pre-proposal submission and where you're addressing which topic, where you pick like goal A1, number 2, you can have more than one. So if you're under a particular goal, like I don't know, say this goal, and you want to do number 2 and number 6, because or whatever, you just put that in that section, just goal C2 number whatever, or another goal. So, and then the rest of your pre-proposal will be guided by addressing those that you're trying to address. So you would just list them, if that helps clarify it. So if you find 2 of these numbered research that are related, that you kind of want to work on, you can list them and write your pre-proposal accordingly.
I see. So we don't need to detail like that necessarily in that 2-page narrative. It's really just putting those up at the top.
No, I would actually back that up a little bit. On your cover page, you can sort of do the numbers, but I think it is particularly helpful to be able to describe how the research you're doing is addressing those priorities,
Yeah,
not just listing them.
Yeah, that's part of
there's 2 pieces. There's your cover page that has where you would, I think, list the ones, and then in the 2-page you would want to really try and describe how the research you're proposing is addressing those topics.
Okay, yeah.
So you have here where you're listing what topics you're addressing in that list, and then that's in number 4. And then when you get down to the description, you want to explain how the research will address the topics you've chosen. And then, so you want to state the objectives. So the objectives are going to be the objectives to address those topics. And then you're going to describe the approach to meet those objectives. And then you're going to describe the expected products, outcomes, and use of those of that approach. So you explain how you're going to address those topics and provide overall objectives. And then you're going to describe how you're going to meet those objectives, the approach, the methods, the techniques, and then what you expect to get out of that. Does that help clarify it? Okay.
Yes, thanks.
All right. So anybody else have any other questions? If you have questions related to budgets or match or that kind of thing, you can ask Jean Ann. And if you have any other questions related to preparing your pre-proposal, you can ask me. And be happy to answer any of your questions. We encourage you to include Sea Grant scholars in your project. If you have had experience with Sea Grant before, think of having a colleague that is maybe an early career researcher or new to the New York area as a co-PI. To kind of sort of as a mentor for newer researchers. We encourage that. So I hope we were able to answer your questions and help clarify some of the questions you might have.
And of course, as you get into this, if you have any other questions, do feel free to reach out, either call or email Lane, Jean-Ann, otherwise, and do really appreciate you all, your interest and engaging in this and asking really helpful questions.
Yep, we appreciate.
I had
your
one
interest.
quick. I had one question. Thank you very much for this webinar. It was very helpful. In the call, it says that researchers are strongly encouraged to contact New York Sea Grant Extension staff with their ideas to improve their understanding of what information and products may be most helpful to coastal constituents. Could you talk a little bit more about that, and if it's also helpful to include those sorts of extension staff as potential collaborators or stakeholders?
Yeah, so you could contact us or contact Sea Grant Extension personnel to help determine who would be the audience for your project, and they could act as a liaison with contacting them and informing those potential users of what you plan to do and what would they want to see as a result. You could go over the call with them and kind of hone your project so that it would be something that they would be interested in.
So Maha, if I could also add a little bit to that, thank you for that question. So one of the things that's incredibly important, what sort of differentiates Sea Grant research from some of the other RFPs and that kind of thing is the importance of extensible research so that it's applicable and accessible to our coastal communities. And so what will really help with that is engaging with our extension specialists, our New York Sea Grant extension specialists that you have enumerated their names and contact in the RFP to talk about what your project is, how it might be most effectively translated and reach the coastal communities that you're interested in informing, whether it's for decision making or preparedness or whatever it might be. So just reaching out to your extension colleagues in New York Sea Grant to get input on that and help you sort of visualize how the research that you're doing can be applied and accessible by those communities. And a similar question is in the chat. Is it required to have Sea Grant staff member on the pre-proposal? You don't need to have, and Lane, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't need to have a Sea Grant staff member on the pre-proposal, but it does, or the full proposal, but it does really help with the outreach component and ensuring its extensibility if you engage with our extension staff to talk through the research. So I don't know if Maha and Ruth, if those answered your questions, if it begot more questions, but hopefully that helps clarify a little bit that aspect.
That helps a lot. Thank you.
And Ruth, hopefully that got your question as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, I think that covers it. I hope you found the information helpful, and I hope that will help you with writing your pre-proposal. We're looking forward to receiving those in January, and don't hesitate to contact us if you have questions, and good luck preparing your pre-proposal. And
thank you.
From you. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you all. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Look forward
Happy
to hearing more
holidays.
from you.